Good evening, America. Tonight, the secrets are over. The deal that has been described, denied, leaked, called fake, confirmed, walked back, renamed, and debated for 5 consecutive weeks is now public. Senior United States officials read out the full 14-point memorandum of understanding to reporters on Wednesday. CNN obtained the text from a U.S. official. Bloomberg obtained a separate copy. Newsweek published a complete breakdown. The Council on Foreign Relations published a detailed analysis. And tonight, every American who has been watching this war, paying higher gas prices for 110 days, watching bombs fall on Lebanon, watching helicopters go down in the Strait of Hormuz, watching Congress try to stop a war their president never asked them to authorize, every single one of you deserves to know exactly what is in those 14 points. Because what the text reveals is something that the Trump administration spent the last week desperately trying to prevent you from reading. The deal gives Iran toll-free passage through the Strait of Hormuz for only 60 days, after which fees can be imposed. It removes all American forces from the proximity of Iran within 30 days of the final deal. It releases all of Iran's frozen assets upon implementation. It does not require Iran to surrender its enriched uranium, only to downblend it to a minimum standard. It does not require Iran to dismantle its nuclear program, and in return, Iran agrees to let ships pass through the strait it still controls for 60 days for free. America's own Council on Foreign Relations said it plainly tonight. The Americans are talking of peace. The Iranians are talking of victory. Tonight, we are going to go through every single point of this deal so that you, the American people, can judge for yourselves. Stay with me, because tonight is the most important night of this entire war. Let us start with how this deal became public, because the process of its release is itself a story about a White House that has been desperate to control the narrative of its own peace agreement. For days after Trump announced the deal was complete and posted ships of the world, start your engines on Truth Social, the actual text of the Memorandum of Understanding was kept secret. Not from Iran, from the American public. Trump at the G7 summit told reporters the text is not final. He said it is a memorandum of understanding. He then said, if I don't like it, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs right smack in the middle of their head. So the deal is complete and also not final, and also the president reserves the right to resume bombing. That is the official American position on its own peace agreement as of Wednesday morning. Then CNN published the 14 points it obtained from a U.S. official. Bloomberg obtained a separate draft with similar language. Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency published its own version. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung posted on social media denying the CNN report's accuracy, claiming the supposed text does not reflect the language of the actual MOU. And then, within hours of that denial, senior U.S. officials held a briefing for reporters and read the exact details of the deal aloud. They read it out loud. The same deal the White House was denying 2 hours earlier. The administration denied the deal was public and then made it public themselves within the same news cycle. That is how desperate the White House is to control the framing of what America actually agreed to. And that desperation tells you everything about how the text reads when you actually examine it. Now let us go through the 14 points, because every single American deserves to hear them clearly and completely. Point 1. The United States and Iran declare the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Both sides undertake not to initiate any war or military operation against each other and to refrain from the threat or use of force. The deal also ensures the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. Point 2. Both countries commit to respecting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refraining from interfering in each other's internal affairs. Point 3. Both countries commit to negotiating and achieving a final deal within a maximum of 60 days, extendable with mutual consent. Point 4, the United States will begin removing its naval blockade immediately upon signing and will fully end the naval blockade within 30 days. During this period, vessel traffic will be restored proportionately as Iran reopens the strait. Point 5, Iran will make arrangements for safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days, only from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa. No charge for 60 days only. 60 days. After which the question of fees, tolls, and service charges is an open question that was not resolved in this memorandum. The Council on Foreign Relations specifically flagged this point in its analysis, noting that while Iran may agree not to charge tolls, service fees, and other mechanisms have been floated, and that how the reopening is managed will be something to watch closely. Point 6. The United States will issue waivers for the export of Iranian crude oil, petroleum products, and all associated services, including banking, insurance, and transportation, immediately upon signing and until sanctions are terminated. Point 7. The United States undertakes to make fully available for use the frozen or restricted funds and assets of Iran upon the implementation of this MOU. Both countries will mutually agree on the procedures for releasing these funds during the 60-day negotiations. And here is the specific language that has caused the most controversy. Such funds, whether retained in the original account or transferred, shall be made fully usable for payment to any ultimate beneficiary designated by the Central Bank of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Central Bank of Iran, the same central bank that the United States Treasury has sanctioned for decades for financing terrorism. Iran's frozen assets will be released to be used by anyone the Central Bank of Iran designates. Trump said America is not putting up 10 cents. The MOU says America will make all frozen assets fully available for use by whoever Iran's central bank points to. Point 8. Iran will take meaningful steps to address the international community's concerns about its nuclear activities. It will downblend its highly enriched uranium to a minimum standard, not destroy, not remove from the country, downblend to a minimum. The Newsweek analysis confirmed this, a new minimum standard for downblending. Iran keeps its uranium. Iran reduces the enrichment level. How far it reduces it and under what verification mechanism is left to the 60-day follow-on talks. Point 9. Iran commits to allowing IAEA inspectors back into the country for monitoring and verification purposes. Point 10, both parties commit to supporting Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty and to a ceasefire framework covering all Lebanese territory. Point 11, both parties commit to not supporting third parties in attacks against each other. Point 12, prisoner and detainee exchanges between the two countries. Point 13, a framework for economic cooperation and reconstruction to be developed during the 60-day negotiation period. Point 14, both parties agree to work toward normalization of diplomatic relations over time. That is the deal. 14 points. And the Council on Foreign Relations, one of the most prestigious and nonpartisan foreign policy institutions in America, published its analysis tonight with a headline that says everything you need to know. Trump's Iran deal reopens the strait. Much remains to be done. Here is what the CFR analysis specifically said, because it is one of the most important assessments of this deal you will read anywhere. First, it noted that Iran has partly succeeded in setting the agenda. The nuclear issue is not part of the agreement, but Israel's conduct in Lebanon is. Second, Tehran has already made clear that it will not ship out its highly enriched uranium, and it does not view the IAEA as a neutral arbiter. Third, the 60-day timetable for resolving all remaining issues is, in the CFR's own assessment, hard to see as sustainable. Fourth, toll-free passage through the strait is guaranteed for only 60 days, after which the question of fees is unresolved. Fifth, the deal provides for the United States to remove its forces from the proximity of Iran within 30 days after the final deal, meaning American military positioning in the entire Gulf region is subject to renegotiation. Let us now look at what the deal does not say, because the absences are as important as what is present. The deal does not require Iran to stop enriching uranium. It requires downblending to a minimum standard, the level of which is not specified in the MOU. The deal does not require Iran to surrender its nuclear material out of the country. It requires Iran to take meaningful steps, which is language so vague it could mean almost anything. The deal does not specify what happens to the Strait of Hormuz after 60 days. It provides for toll-free passage for 60 days only. The deal does not say what happens to American military forces currently in Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, and other Gulf nations. It says forces will be removed from the proximity of Iran after the final deal, but proximity is not defined, and neither is the timeline for base closures versus repositioning. And the deal does not resolve Iran's ballistic missile program, its support for Hezbollah, its support for the Houthis, or its broader regional proxy network. Every single one of those issues is deferred to the 60-day negotiation window or beyond. Now, let us talk about what experts are saying about who won and who lost this war, because tonight the expert consensus is clearer and more consistent than at any point in 110 days. The Council on Foreign Relations said the Americans are talking of peace and the Iranians are talking of victory. CFR senior fellow Ray Takei, one of the foremost American experts on Iran, wrote that Iran has partly succeeded in setting the agenda and that the nuclear issue is not part of the agreement. Gregory Brew of the Eurasia Group, who called Iran's strategic victory weeks ago, saw nothing in the released text to change that assessment. Elliot Abrams, who served as a senior national security official in both George W. Bush and Trump's first administration, contributed to the CFR analysis and noted that there are good reasons to be skeptical that a comprehensive peace, even if reached, will hold. And CFR senior fellow Elisa Ewers warned that getting as close as possible to the pre-war status quo will be critical for global commerce and for allies who will need to live with whatever arrangements are established for the Strait of Hormuz. The Iran side of the equation is even clearer. Iran's own framing of this deal is explicit. Iranian officials and state media have been describing this as a victory since the moment the MOU text became public. Iran entered this war with its supreme leader alive, its military intact, its nuclear program active, and its proxies funded and deployed across the region. 110 days later, its original supreme leader is dead, its military is severely degraded, and it has 21% of its pre-war missiles remaining. But it has also secured the following through this deal: all of its frozen assets released, oil export sanctions waived immediately, American forces to be removed from its proximity within 30 days of a final deal, the nuclear question deferred to future talks with no requirement to surrender uranium, Iranian management of the Strait of Hormuz, the most important oil shipping lane on Earth, preserved during the implementation period and unresolved after 60 days, a reconstruction framework worth hundreds of billions of dollars to be negotiated, and a ceasefire that covers Lebanon, protecting Hezbollah from further Israeli attacks under the deal's framework, military defeat, strategic victory. That is the balance sheet the 14 points produce. Let us now address the $300 billion reconstruction fund directly, because the confusion around this number has been one of the defining stories of the last 48 hours. The MOU text says both parties commit to a framework for economic cooperation and reconstruction to be developed during the 60-day negotiation period. It does not specify a dollar amount. The $300 billion figure came from J.D. Vance on CBS Monday morning when he said that is the sort of thing they could have access to, funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition. Trump then denied it. The White House then denied it. Vance then denied it on Fox. The White House renamed it an investment fund. But the CFR analysis confirms that the MOU's language on frozen assets specifically makes those assets, including the roughly $24 billion Iran has been demanding, fully available for use by whoever Iran's central bank designates upon implementation. And a separate Gulf-funded reconstruction mechanism, while not specified in the text, is being discussed in parallel diplomatic channels. The number may be disputed. The concept is not. Here is something that happened today that America needs to understand as context for the deal's domestic political reception. The Senate Armed Services Committee buried inside its annual defense authorization bill a measure to redesignate the United States Department of Defense as the Department of War. Not the Department of Defense, the Department of War. That name change, which administration officials have already been using informally, is now moving through Congress. The same week America is signing a peace deal with Iran, The body responsible for that military is being renamed the Department of War. That is not an accident. That is a declaration of identity. And it tells you something important about how the Trump administration intends to present American military power to the world going forward, as a war-making institution rather than a defense institution. Trump said something at the G7 summit that deserves to be the closing thought of tonight's full analysis. A reporter asked him if the text of the agreement is final. Trump said, "No, it's not final. It's a memorandum of understanding. And if I don't like it, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs on their head. If I don't like it, if they don't behave, we'll go right back to dropping bombs right smack in the middle of their head, because they've misbehaved for 47 years." Read that statement carefully. The deal is not final. The deal could be replaced by bombs. The President of the United States said this at the G7 summit of the world's most powerful democracies. He said the peace agreement he announced as complete on Truth Social is not final, and he can resume bombing at any point if he does not like it. That is not the language of a peace settlement. That is the language of a temporary ceasefire maintained at gunpoint. And it tells you exactly what the next 60 days of nuclear negotiations, reconstruction fund discussions, Strait of Hormuz management talks, and Lebanese sovereignty framework negotiations are going to look like. A deal that could be replaced by bombs is not peace, it is a pause. And the 14 points that America signed and then denied and then read aloud and then denied again are the document on which that pause is built. America, here's my question for you tonight, and it is the most important one in 110 days of this war. The full 14-point MOU text is now public. It gives Iran toll-free straight access for 60 days only, after which fees can return. It releases all Iranian frozen assets. It waives oil sanctions immediately. It does not require Iran to surrender its uranium. It removes American forces from Iran's proximity after the final deal. And it defers everything that actually matters to 60 days of negotiations that have not yet begun. The Council on Foreign Relations said the Iranians are talking of victory. Trump said he'll go back to dropping bombs if he doesn't like it. Here is my direct question. After 110 days of war, 49% higher gas prices, thousands of Lebanese civilians dead, an Apache helicopter at the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz, a $300 billion reconstruction fund, and a deal that gives Iran 60 days of toll-free passage and all its frozen assets back, do you believe America won this war? Drop your answer in the comments right now. This is the defining question of your generation. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Friday's Geneva signing ceremony is the next chapter, and we will be here every single moment of it.